today with Ms. Pilar Velasco. Pilar is a Spanish journalist currently working at Cadena SER, Prisa Group, the radio network leader in Spain. Specializing in investigative and data journalism, she has exposed political and economic malpractices in Spain and uncovered high-profile international corruption cases. Her reports have focused on revealing unlawful and unethical activities of the powerful against the public interest. Pilar is the author of 2 books, one about social change in Spain and another one about the rise of indignados, the Occupy movement, both of which have been translated into several languages. She has also published 2 essays in Germany about the challenges of democracy in Europe in the context of the economic crisis and how new models of citizen participation are emerging. She's a member of the Strategy Group, A Soul of Europe, a European Union initiative to strengthen and connect communities through different frames of discussion. She collaborates with several digital media platforms, radio stations, and TV channels in Spain and Latin America. Pilar teaches investigative journalism in Madrid and presents at conferences across Europe and Latin America. She's also the founder and board member of the Spanish Association of Investigative Journalists, with the aim of promoting cross-border investigative journalism and reinforcing freedom of expression. Today, Pilar will be speaking to us about investigative journalism and democracy in turbulent times. Please join me in welcoming Pilar.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Also considering that today is kind of a party day, so I really appreciate it. And it's Monday, which is a lot. So as Asia presented to me, my name is Pilar Velasco. I'm a journalist, an investigative journalist. I live in Madrid. I'm based there. I work in Cadena SER radio. It's like NPR radio, Spanish radio in Spain. The biggest is owned by Prisa Group, which is also the biggest media company in Spain. And I'm seeing that you're from kind of different countries here. And also I know some of you that are specialized in some fields that maybe I'm not going to stop in the presentation, but we can talk about them later. So feel free to ask me later about another issues, big cases of other countries, because I just have selected a few cases, so we have the chance to talk later. And think about the role of journalism is like a common space to say that it's so linked with democracy. I mean, journalism, when it's weak, the democracy of the country and the institutions get weaker also. And if we agree, I'm going to underline a definition of journalism that I like from Adolph Oaks, which is the founder of the New York Times in 1896. And he says that to give the news impartially without fear or favor, regardless of party, set, or interest involved. And that's the role of journalism in general. So facts speak for themselves, he used to say it. So in investigative journalism, we have to unveil the facts, which is pretty much the same, but sometimes requires a different strategy, tools, and everything. So that's my field of specialization was wrongdoing cases. I started doing that in 2005. I would like to put some context on this because in 2005, Spain was doing really good. The economy was boosting. We were the 8th economy of the world, which is pretty good. So through those years, until the crisis impacted Spain like in a really hard way, I could testify how hard the cases, the corruption cases, hit a country and its institutions and make it, as I said before, so weakness. So to start, I have to also make a definition of what corruption is in journalism in general. Let me put an example, a book by the journalist Norman Osler, based on the files of Hitler's personal physician. Unveil, I think it has like a couple years, this book, unveil the use of drug using during the third Reich of Hitler's. That's corruption, the use of public money for your own interests. So with this example, the use of public money linked to the abuse of political or business power has occurred in Spain, as I said, in all the major institutions of the state, highlighting the need of journalism in two ways. Why was so important the use of journalism, not just in a local way, but also in an international way of it? Because all the corruption networks, even when they are so local, they hide themselves out of the country. It happened in Spain, it happens in France, in Italy, all over the Europe. And also if we switch to continents. The money from corruption cases from Latin America are hidden in Spain, as the money from Spanish corruption cases are hidden in Latin America. And the reason is easy. They go away from the local laws and local accountability. So I underline some of the definition here, and so when we talk about political corruptions, it goes through different categories. It's like I'm sure you have heard that, like it goes from black to white. It's the term that we use in corruption, and there is so many grays on it. So corruption works by how it works also. It works dismantling the control system of the institutions. Spain in the post-era of Franco, in the post-Franco period, it was such a model of success. I'm sure you have heard of it, the successful model of Spanish transition. And it was because we in Spain sort of built such a really strong network of institutions during the 80s. What happened 20 years later, when all this money were coming through credits and bank and busting and construction business, was that the institutions start, and the politicians, of course, dismantling all these political controls and institutional controls. So when we see, as journalists, as observers, as policymakers, when we see that the institutions are taking away those controls, we have to put the focus on it. And how it works also. We are, in Spain, as I said, in 2005, it was so easy to go from the concrete cases all over Spain, all over the communities. We have 17 communities, which are like states here, like the federal states here. And so we were reporting like dozens, until we saw that it was sort of a pattern that affects all the institutions, as I said. To make it funny, I'm going to make an example of what's a pattern in journalism. I'm sure you know this movie, Spotlight 2015. He's Marty Baron, the executive editor-in-chief of Washington Post. And in this movie, he's trying to explain to his journalists why it was not enough to report about 50 priests that were committing abuses in the church. And he said, 50 is not enough. And the journalists were like, 50 is not enough in a city like Boston? And that was the answer to define what as a pattern.
We need to focus on the institution, not the individual priests. Practice and policy. Show me the church manipulated the system so that these guys wouldn't have to face charges. Show me they put those same priests back into parishes time and time again. Show me this was systemic, that it came from the top down. We're going after the system. I think that's the bigger story.
So practice and policies, and that's the big story. How the system works to allow that those corruption cases could be alive. Because a pattern allows two things which are so important. A pattern in corruption allows to maintain this corruption in the time and maintain it in the institution, which is like kind of surprising. How can you have a corruption system into an institution for so long? So that's when you have to go through the system. And that happened in Spain for kind of the Spanish citizen surprise in all those layers. Government, monarchy, banks, political parties, institutions, public companies across borders, which is pretty much a lot and shocking. So I'm going to show you, to just talk a little bit about some of those cases. How could we go from transition success to these kind of headlines? That this one is like from 2 years ago, not even 2 years ago. Spanish never-ending corruption problem. I have to say that these kind of headlines from 2007 comes after 10 years of journalistic work too. So I have chosen this case that everybody likes it, about the monarchy in Spain, because everybody knows the monarchy in Spain, and why people got so angry about this case. The Spanish royal corruption scandal was sort of like a typical corruption case in Spain. And the son-in-law of Juan Carlos, former king of Spain, make a foundation, NOS Foundation, and I underlined the 6 million euro of public money into tax havens because, as I said, all the money always goes away. And with his wife, the Infanta Cristina, they were sort of being benefited. They got this benefit from public contracts. She was not condemned. He has been condemned like 4 months ago in 2018 for more than 4 years of prison. He's actually in prison. So the citizens in Spain got so angry because, you know, monarchy gets so much public money. They have they represent the state of Spain, and they have like a big budget for those kind of expenses. So the people, the citizens ask, why do you need extra money? I mean, why do you need to steal through a foundation so much extra money? Why do you need to buy a castle of more than, I don't remember the millions of dollars, if you have all of their business from the kingdom and the patrimony and the whole houses? So this case was like sort of representative of this kind of basic package of corruption. The scandal is kind of still on. 3 months ago, maybe 2, this last summer, now is facing accusations of money laundering. It's open an interesting debate, which is nothing about investigative journalism, but I would like to underline. The King of Spain cannot be investigated because he's protected by the Constitution. So we're having now this kind of debate like how a Constitution can protect a king from possible penalties. So he will not be investigated, but the German aristocrat claims the former king pocketed 80 million euros from a contract with Arabia Saudi that are like nobody knows where. But it happened 3 months ago. The case that it was a big case was this one. This case also has all the meaning points of a corruption case. It released in 2011. The condemn was this year, a few years later, and the judge of this case was really hard pressured by the prosecutors, which are selected for the government. It was really hard to maintain this case on trial through those years until he got the penalty, the prison sentence. I'm sure you also remember this case. Austerity in Europe. Do you remember how when Europeans, North countries called the South one pigs? Yeah, the Portuguese, Italy, Greece, thank you. And where are we? And Spain, yeah, and Spain. It was the times of the rescue in Europe, the rescue of the southern countries in Europe. And this is the cover that makes no doubt about it, because the government later refused the rescue. Rescue to Spain. Spain was rescued in a different way than Greece or Portuguese. Spain was saved through its banks. The Eurogroup gives all those millions to save the Spanish banks because they were crashing. When the rescue was in the same time that the rescue was going on in Europe, the corruption investigator starts to grow up in the national court, because the politicians who used to run the bank, now also a few years later, we can say that they were supported by, as the Guardian defines, culture of greed, cronyism, and political meddling. There is so many kind of wrongdoing cases around the Spanish banks. I'm just going to underline a few of them. They were using credit cards, black credit cards for their own expenses. So now they will go to jail for that. Also, let me see. Yeah. In the Bankia's APO, during his mandate, I don't know if you remember him, Rodrigo Rato. He was the former IMF president and Minister of Economy in the government of Jose Maria Aznar a few years ago. You're pretty young to remember that. And so how they did it, to explain it in an easy way, they were taking the money of the citizens, like in a couple months, maybe less, just to try to go to the market. And now it's being investigated, and I can pretty much assure that they will be condemned for that. So I don't want to jump to this case. This was a really representative case about how the rescue and politics and democracy is so linked with, with how the politicians were running the Bankias, which is the national bank in Spain. The government, after these cases, after Bankia crashed, after being rescued for Europe, had to nationalize the Spanish bank, the meaning Spanish bank. This case, I say the huge case because we will need like books and theses to talk about this case. Gürtel case is the case that has caused the career to Mariano Rajoy, the former president. When I was applying for this fellowship, for the World Fellow, he was the president of Spain, and he had to resign like a couple, in July, maybe, no, May, sorry. Gürtel case is so representative of this kind of cross-border cases. It affected, of course, the president, a few ministers, well, dozen of ministers of Spain. It caused the career, and they have to resign some ministries or presidents for communities. And it took to journalists like 9 years to maintain this case alive, with so many pressures from the government. I remember that the newspaper from my company, in 1 year, in 2010, was holding like exactly 9 suits from the government, just for informing for this case. But even the police was being sued by the government just for informing about this case. So try to imagine a country with a hard crisis, 20% of the population, unemployment, all those pressures, and being informed and maintain like the level to inform. So this case was released thanks to the rogatory commissions. I don't know if that's the properly word in English. Commissions, when you ask to another judge in another country to give you, to the country to give you information about the bank accounts and the bank accounts abroad. So after like 3 years, finally, Switzerland answered to Spain, and it was more than 30 million euros hidden by the treasury of the Conservative Party, hidden in Switzerland. They were hiding this money in Switzerland, and in Latin America, they use another way to hide the money. They have fake businesses. So you could find the treasurer of the Conservative political party, they were governing by that time, having business of orange landscape, or how was another one, which was impossible, I mean, like really fake, because he was being the treasurer, so he could not be, I think it was a kind of good in Uruguay. So they were having business in Uruguay, Argentina, Mexico, Brazil, and so on. So it took to the journalists a few time and to the court to realize where the money of the corruption was being hidden in Latin America. I said that this is a long case because after this case, so many policymakers have changed some policies. For instance, Switzerland changed the law to help countries like Spain to make this change of information quick, at least. And Latin America also has now really strong agreements to help those cases don't last 9 years sometime, which is, I mean, I was young when this case started. I was almost, I was like close finishing my college time. And so I have chosen a case just for, I hope I don't bore you so much with this case, but for me it's an example of this, which I'm kind of obsessed in a good way, of how any local case that we take as journalists or even like researchers, we realize that it's always behind of a really big case when politicians are involved. Is the water contracts in Spain and Latin America. It starts in Madrid in 2005. When I started these cases, it was 2005, 2006. Madrid has the biggest company, water company. It's public company, it's still public. And they, public companies in Spain start doing business abroad. I mean, in Africa and mainly Latin America, because of the relation of both countries. So this transnational case starts in Madrid, like in the capital of Madrid, not even in the community. And finally, now it has impacted dozen countries through the contracts of water and services, and has revealed a contracting system under judicial, is finally under judicial investigation. It takes us so long to finally to get the court to investigate this case. We're talking about millions of euros in bribes, commissions, and illegal financing of political parties, not only in Spain, but also in Colombia and Panama, and also the investigation is being opened in Brazil now. What's important about this is that it was not only affecting to the budget of a community like Madrid, but it was really impacting the lives of the citizens in so many communities in Colombia. For instance, some communities like Santa Marta, Bogota, all the coast from Caribbean coast. If you take those years from 2005 to 2015, you could see like the people could not even get water or healthy water. And Spain was responsible of those contracts because we were like putting this public company abroad. That's like a perfect case of why corruption matters and why it really affects at the end. When you have like this kind of system, the service is not being doing at the end of it. So finally, it was like the Spanish Odebrecht that hits Colombia. We started, as I said, this case in Madrid, and finally, we managed to open this case in Colombia. A mega police operation in Spain that affects all the water from Costa del Caribe. The police seeks, I have just put some of those. Why I put this example like a real example of cross-border journalism? Because it was a case just working in the media. I was working this thing with this issue with just a couple editor-in-chiefs, and we had to do it by ourselves because it was not an investigative or police investigative open. So how do we work it? We start working in all those countries where we didn't have resources to travel, and even Colombia was sort of dangerous place to travel by myself. So we realized that we could be helped for ICIJ's colleagues, which are the fellows from International Consortium of Investigative Journalism based in Washington. They're pretty known now for Panama Papers, but they have a long story working on those cases. And it was useful also to share some databases, share access of records. What I mean for access of records, when you don't have really resources and you're working trying to make a local, global case, you cannot pay like all the register from Panama, from Dominican Republic, so on, so on. So try to make a network of fellows that are already paying for those databases and try to share them. And this kind of network that we start creating with those kind of local cases in 2010 were so useful 5 years later when we had all of the big cases that I mentioned before. Lawyers, different lawyers from different countries were so useful too. And we also create some alliances with European media colleagues from Tamedia Center, for instance, or etc., just to help us to follow the banking entities, financial movement, companies, checking, etc., etc. In Switzerland and Luxembourg, because as I said, it was in Latin America and Switzerland, the money and the fake business. And also in Spain and UK, we have like this open. Finally, this kind of investigation, which are so local, had a good result. The former president of Madrid went to Yale. The judicial case has affected to so many countries that that have this kind of judicial investigations open. I would like to underline also, it was the first time that Colombia and Spain make a judicial case, like a mirror, the justice system is working together in this case, like with a new mechanism that helps also journalists to keep going with this investigation. And of course, the judicial case has suffered similar pressure that all of those kind of investigative cases. The prosecutors, as I mentioned before, is the fiscal head who is chosen by the government. So try to avoid the police operation. Finally, in this local case, I would like to underline what I was mentioned before about the system and the pattern. It was a local case, but at the end was affecting ex-ministers, ministers, secretaries of state, prosecutors, and Jews. When the police released this local case, it was a network of a lot of people from the government behind it and allowing to this case being alive. Yeah.
The judicial case has detected a plot of bites. Bribes. Oh, it's bribes.
It's Ron Reuters. Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you, sorry. Thank you. So the investigation keeps going on in all those countries, as I mentioned. We finally open also commissions in different parliaments, local ones and the general one. And the important thing is, I forgot to mention it, there is not an investigative case, if it's kind of succeeds, that has not an impact in the population and also in the system. I mean, when you have a wrong system, you have to transform it. So finally, the regular contracts have been suspended. Last week, the company has been taken by the public system in Colombia until those facts are accredited, and the recovery of the money found in tax havens is being recovered. The money from tax haven has been found in a lot of countries, as I mentioned. And just also again, this is kind of a 4-point that works so good in any kind of global issue that you want to start. Media, freelancers, local communities, technology and databases and all kind of records. The 4-point is so important. You need technology, you need innovation, you need to create databases for any kind of issue that you start working on. Because when you start those cases, they always look pretty much local, any of the cases that you take, but they get bigger, believe me. And I mean, bigger can be like, even if you have 50 people involved, that gets bigger. So please, technology, database, that's so important. I even have to do so many courses in 2014 to keep going with those kind of investigations, because I needed to know how to use those databases all around the world. Local communities are so important, and yes, it's a scheme that we are using in my media, and a lot of colleagues are using in every kind of investigative issue that we work. I also want to underline the benefits of those kind of networks. You save resources, you make a global case, you build networks, and you set collaboration with your partners, and you amplify your case. I won't imagine what will happen if we stop those kind of cases at the beginning of the investigation. If 2 years later we said, okay, we have a local case here. I mean, we have made a big breaking news in our community, so just stop the case. I mean, it's good to keep going on. It's true that it's not so, you need sort of patience if you're a journalist, because you're going to be like a long time undercover, and we don't like to be undercover as journalists. So, but I mean, it's a good advice that I received a few years ago, and it works. Just like be patient, the big case will appear at the end. So just keep trying to work on this one. And as I mentioned it before, the unprecedented judicial collaboration, I'm really excited about it because I never thought that we could make an impact also in the way of prosecutors and judges works from different countries. It allows also to get more witnesses' confessions driven by the investigative research. When someone makes a confession in Colombia, there is a hit, a backlash in Spain because someone is feeling accused. And that happens also with Brazil witnesses, with other witnesses in Switzerland. I mean, they began to accuse each other to try to save each other. So it's the perfect moment of an investigation. And the tension between both judicial investigation cases benefits both sides. When one works harder, the other ones don't get back. So it's like the healthy competition is always good in any field. So I put this case also because in 2011-12, it was another example about, I want to keep going with the question, about how good was to learn how to work with different countries and have those kind of collaboration already done. Because when Falciani is a whistleblower like Edward Snowden, like so many whistleblowers, this one is Snowden was important. Falciani was important in Spain because he was detained in Spain, and the database was released in Spain, and the police worked with this database here. The database had this 130,000 tax evaders all over the world, and we were working on those. ICIJ was working on this, Le Monde newspaper in France too, and we were working on this case too. Only France and Spain have recovered 600 million euros, and it's another example of case that it has so many up and downs. So many times looked like the case it was not going to succeed, because the judicial investigations that has helped 28 countries, it was also an investigation here in the United States, and the judicial investigations had to be coordinated. That was kind of also pioneer in that moment. They had so many pressures, so it was so important, the role of the media here in so many countries working together in these kind of cases to maintain them alive. And also, I'm going to keep that one because I don't want to see myself. Judicial investigation has shoes, and I'm putting this as an example also of the collaboration. A journalist realizes how important are the networks abroad when you're sue. Because when you're sure, it's like, okay, you have your company behind you, but you don't know how long it's going to take a case under trial against you. So when people know what you're doing, when you help those kind of networks, I mean, there is an institutional Reporters Without Borders that helps you when you need help, or when they understand that some kind of pressure has to be released to everyone. So Reporters Without Borders was so important as so many ones in Spain, because we had these kind of pressures that are happening here now with Trump. What can I say? Like even the Ministry of Treasury, I released a case about, it was in Mexico, Cemex company. No, it was not so big, at least. It was a Cemex. It's a big company, a big, huge company. And the Ministry of Spain condoned 500 million euros of penalty. So I released that, like the ministry is condoning 500 million euros to a company with no reason. So the ministry from the Congress accused to the owner of the company he said, I'm the Ministry of the Treasury, and I know your debts, so don't go back to me. Can you imagine the Ministry of the Treasury? I mean, of course he knows all those numbers, but we are media. I mean, we have the right to have debts, even the right to have debts. But that's how they pressure, and the networks are so important also to go under that. I underline also some of the numbers so you can imagine, I mean, you can get an image of how corruption hits a country. 90,000 million euros per year, according to the Spanish National Chamber of Markets and Competition. More than half of the amount of the fraud is extra cost. I mean, it's so easy to make that kind of, I mean, they always do it also in Spain. They put the double price, and you never know where is the half of it. It costs more than 500 per year to its citizen. And those are data from Eurogroup, our European data also. 70,000 people was arrested only in 1 year. Politicians and business people, most of their politicians in all kind of levels. The arrest people were from 3 to that. I mean, you can multiply that. And the cost of corruption, I mean, you all know that eliminates free business competence, also alters electoral and democracy competence between political parties, because, I mean, there is no competence if one political party gets so much money than the other one. There is a political party, financial political party because of that, to make an equal competence. And it makes weakens confidence in institutions and increase the possibility of extremism and populism. Remember a case, I mean, there is not a scientific study, but I always remember a case in France when Fillon, the candidate Fillon, was like a strong candidate, pretty much close to win, and he had to resign because of corruption case, because her wife was being benefit of his shares. So in that moment, I was like, my God, and Le Pen was getting so strong. And by that time, Macron was not in the map. So it was like, we have all those strong candidates resigning at the same time that the extreme right and extreme political parties get so strong. So, I mean, we have so many examples of how those kind of abuse of power hits political parties and benefits extremism. And in a global context, it's the image of your country abroad. I mean, of course, I will love to choose another issue to talk about Spain. You're all invited. But I thought it was an interesting case to make the picture of how it's so obvious that those kind of cases that we kind of isolate sometimes and we put like in the box of corruption are so much linked to democracy. What happened in Spain was that it was a few years that the cases were higher than we said economy in B. So those B cases, those B democracy was being harder. It was being bigger than the regular one. So I think we have time. I mentioned at the beginning that I work like in, thank you. I mentioned at the beginning that we can talk about any of your cases from your country. So feel free to ask more specific about cross-border. Yeah.
I had a quick question. What happened to Talciani, that case? I don't remember.
He's living in Spain. Actually, he's, the justice from Switzerland is looking, I mean, they asked for the extradition. They already asked again this year, 2018. And it was so close to make an exchange between Falcianis and Catalonia politicians. It was close, but finally the Spanish justice said, I mean, he helps, I mean, yeah, he is a collaborator of the justice still now. I mean, even he has his white and blacks, but he collaborates with Spanish justice, French justice, and Italian one, actually now. And he's running some program about cyber currency, and I mean, he's in Spain. But he can travel all around Europe except in Switzerland and United States, I think. Yeah.
Thanks, that was wonderful. I only knew about 10% of these cases, so it's a little
I have
depressing, actually. So I have probably about a dozen questions, but I'll just ask you one, which is I grew up in Brazil. I spent a lot of time there back and forth, and of course we all know, well, some of us here in this room I'm sure know, that they are sort of in the upper league tables of corruption, what has been going on for years. One of the things that interests me is, I watch the Brazilian nightly news, Jornal Nacional, maybe 3 nights a week, and every night, except during the World Cup, every night there is a major segment on new indictments and so on. And they show documents, and then there are words that come off the screen, the main words in the document, and they show numbers and whatever, and it's just relentless, and then it's like a standard formula. And then at the end of this, there's 2 presenters, one man, one woman, and they both alternate reading the responses of the lawyers of the accused, saying, these are totally false charges, blah, blah, blah. So this has been going on for years. The graphics have gotten better over the TV, but it's one of the ways in which in every household, the consciousness of corruption and the culture has been affected. In Spain, has there been something like this, where there's just this relentless, always in the news thing, or these like bursts where sometimes people care, and sometimes they get back to their lives? Because in Brazil, it's just like, you saw last night the election results. It's just deeply infused in the culture.
I forgot to mention how also corruption hits the culture of a country. I mean, it permeates everything. And that also happened in Spain during some years. Like the country was changing so quick, and not in a good way, because it was like, it was a culture of you get benefit for something, for a system, so why to complain? And it's so hard to, I have read so many researches about the cost of corruption in politics. And I mean, you cannot find a good conclusion, an ending conclusion, but it's true that at the end, they have to resign at least. I mean, all those cases that I have talked, they have to resign. In Spain, it was so many years that nobody cares about it, but also it was this Indignados movement in Spain in 2011, actually, and we used to have a strong bipartidism in Spain with Democrats and Conservatives, Socialists and Conservatives, and it broke down in 2014. 2 new political parties appear, and they appear claiming against corruption mainly, against inequality for Podemos, and against corruption for Ciudadanos, which is like extreme left, center right, I mean. And they were claiming against corruption, and they have like more than 60% of the young population votes. I mean, the younger people are voting for new political parties. We claim so hard against corruption. So I think at the end it cares. I mean, when you see your country being hit for economy, we used to have the 55% of young people under 25 unemployment, same rates than Greece and than Italy. And citizens were watching those cases on TV. So it was like, I mean, in a country like Spain, which is not so big, 45 million citizens, I mean, you can have a dialogue between government and citizens. And the protester were so high. I mean, I put the monarchy case because it was like a hit. Like, I mean, even the monarchy, even taking extra money, but you don't need it. So, I mean, it's patience also with those cases. It looks like nobody cares. It's like this fine rain, and suddenly, boom, something happens.
But so. In the newspapers and TV all the time? Is it like constantly?
Javier Bárcenas is in the newspaper all the time.
Who?
Bárcenas.
Bárcenas, the treasurer of Conservative, he's in the newspaper all the time. Yes. I mean, I think it's good. I mean, I think it's good. I think it's good, yeah. I mean, if I will have to choose over-inform. Because at the end, you're informing about corruption, which is not, I mean, it's not entertainment. I mean, it's useful information for people. We were so many years nobody cares about those cases. I was so many years, asking for favors, like, please, can you release this breaking news on Sunday afternoon, at least? Yeah, 5 years later, I was doing breaking news all the time. But I mean, I think it's good, yeah.
I was going to ask you, what is the influence of the European Union in member countries' corruption? It seems that every Treasury secretary or minister of finances has something to do with international banking. Guindos in Spain was associated, I don't know if it was with Goldman Sachs or Lehman Brothers or one of those.
He was working.
Guindo was never investigated. He was sitting there with Rajoy for many, many years, and he was in direct contact with international banking.
Yes, I mean.
Right? The European Union, on the other hand, through economical directives and rules, prohibit any hindrance on the movement of capital between countries. So they are free to do whatever they want, right? They put their man in government, and then they relax the rules.
Yeah, but this is a personal opinion, and of course I'm affected, but for the issue that I work. I also agree that the European Union will be stronger, or at least in the past, because it's true that also has been a change in those kind of cases. When they have released, it's harder to reproduce the same cases again. I didn't talk about the benefits, but so many laws have changed. It's true that when you have all of those cases, when you can put former ministers on jail, it's because system works. I mean, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I will expect the same because in the European Union, they respect autonomy of the countries. So even if some ministers or commissioners are being investigated in their own countries for some kind of penalties, they can keep going in the European Union under charges, and there is not a clear protocol for that. Like, I mean, if you've been investigated or if you have those business, I think there is something to do, something else to do, but you're right. Excuse me?
Rato.
Oh, yeah, I mentioned Rato. Well, Rato will go, he was condemned to jail exactly this way. Yeah, he was the president.
Right, then he went to work for Volkswagen, and the Americans sued him because he had given Volkswagen some crazy secrets that only the Americans could have. Right? And finally he ended up in the World Bank.
Yeah, he has actually 6 investigations under him. So I think we can rest calmly.
That's not what he is, right?
Is his what? Sorry?
He's an international economical hitman.
He
Right.
was.
Okay, good.
Yeah, sorry.
So you mentioned that in a lot of your cases there was government pressure to kind of keep it quiet. How do journalists find allies that are not corrupt to keep the investigation going?
You find them in jail.
The pressures are like the ADN of journalism, which, I mean, we work kind of good with those pressures if your media is strong enough to hold them. But we really help a lot between each other. I'm seeing those kind of collaboration and networks are really getting stronger so quick. I'm seeing some of those examples, even those weeks here, like the New York Times runs a story about a Russian spy, and they need someone from Spain helping them because it affects to Spain also. I mean, we really, those kind of networks that I mentioned, like Consortium and other media, they're working so good. Even in the United States, for example, for the White House now in the Trump administration, which is being harder for us Europeans to get in, we're working in consortiums. We go we work each other like 5 big media, for example, I don't remember which ones, like Le Monde, El País, Le Figaro, like the big ones, and we ask for the same interviews. I mean, those kind of collaboration works like in investigative teams, and also in the regular news. Panama Papers, as an example, is a good example of that. I mean, yeah, globalization also has changed journalism in a good way. So we help each other. When there is pressure, we ask for help. Yeah.
I want to ask you something. From your perspective, what's the way to change the system? Because from my point of view, the prison is not enough. How many people is already in prison and the corruption is in the way? And at least in the case of Mexico, prison is like the cheaper solution. Because all the money is still there, the families and the networks of corruption keep the money.
Yeah.
Then to be in prison is like something you have to pay to be in the system.
Yeah.
But what the countries need to do to change this situation?
In my opinion, reinforce the law is kind of the only way, and reinforce the controls of the administration. I mean, you have to avoid it. It's true that what do you win? I mean, what do you earn with having 700,000 politicians being investigated for dozens on Yale? You have to prevent it, because when they are in jail, it's because something has been broken before. A system affecting so many people. So I think the preventions are the only way. I mean, Mr. Casey is an expert on that, but countries has to make stronger agreements to share information, to share databases. I mean, we have those crime organizations working so easy all over the world and so linked with politics also. In Mexico, in Russia, I mean, all around Europe. And you can see them working like in the 80s. Like it takes weeks to share information sometimes, with no years. There is cases in Spain open in 2011 that they're waiting for answers still now, 8 years later, because they sent some commission and it was something wrong, they get back, years. So I think it's prevention laws, and that's the only way.
Control.
And control, yeah. And power.
And
mechanisms clear mechanisms so the politicians has to have like the clear mechanism, like if you're doing that, you have to resign. So, I mean, in Spain it's working at least since 2 years, 3 years, not 3, 2 years, 1 year ago. The mechanisms has been reinforced in some institutions, and it feels, we'll see 5 years later, it sees that it's kind of preventing a little bit. Transparency. We journalists work so hard to have a transparency law in Spain, and it has like 3 or 4 years. It's pretty new. The deputies in the Congress of Spain didn't have to show up their businesses until 1 year ago, which that was hiding so many businesses undercover. So transparency, yeah.
Is there any anti-corruption mechanism that you can work with?
We journalists?
Yeah, or like media.
Yeah, we work as a sources. We go a lot to international transparency. There is so many institutions. There is so many institutions, for instance, to help you to open contracts, public contracts, those kind of contracts that are closed in a country, and you have to open them to get information to see who's behind those businesses. Because political corruption is always about some money, hide money. So, for the political party or for themselves. So yeah, we work a lot with those organizations. Yeah. Angela?
I just wondered, when we had the Parmalat crack.
The what, sorry?
The Parmalat crack in Italy, it kind of changed a bit the culture of investigative journalism, because before we had the clean hands investigation of the mafia, but no one was interested in the journalists who took these cases, which was dreadful. So I was wondering, these investigations that went on for years with the banks, the football teams, the politicians, around Parmalat as a big business, big corporation, did they kind of impact Spain in terms of getting you guys some support? Because you talked about how hard it was to get investigations supported in the media.
Yes, I mean, yes. Also with Italy and Spain, the agreements has changed in the last 5 years for good. I remember a case that is a different one. I haven't worked on that one, so I just know from. But I work in a case about how Calabria mafia, D'Angreta, was penetrating Spain, and the police was working on that. It was the first time they saw Calabria mafia, D'Angreta mafia trying to go through the institutions in Spain. And it was possible because of the Italian police and the Spanish police with special agreements to work together, going through, and they could share information that otherwise you cannot share because, you know, Spanish police just can't work in Spain as Italian police. So special agreements were so good to avoid D'Angreta penetrating to Spain. Maybe now there is some money of D'Angreta, but it looks like there is not. Yeah, groups, at least the one.
Pilar, do you fear for your life doing this work, and what are the precautions you take?
Not for my life. No, I mean, Spain is a safe country. I got like pissed off some periods because I was like, okay, so there is so much pressure and it makes me go slower. I mean, when you have pressure, you go slow, and that makes me. But it's true that we have. I mean, I want to stop. I think doing what I do. So life makes you work better. I mean, that's why you keep working. And I'm kind of aware about the protection that we will need to have in those times. Looks like the environment is changing for journalists. I can see like. I mean, even in Europe, this year we have the first, they killed a journalist in Malta, the mother of one of my colleagues from my age. And it's like, wow, in Europe, they're killing, today was in the news like a Bulgarian journalist that was investigating European funds was killed too. The police doesn't know if he's related. But I mean, because all the big cases are going to, I'm sure of it, are going to be so linked through so many countries. And okay, you can be safe in Spain, but who tell you that you're safe in Ukraine? So I think we will need to create like safest networks to work between us, and to work with communities, because at the end, those kind of cases, I mean, even if it's global, the impact is so local. It impacts in small communities. And we have to protect also the sources that comes to us and of course, both sides. So I think we will need, for communities and journalists, I think we will have to think about it better in the near future. Yeah. Thank you so much.